Jake Morrison was splitting firewood when a 500-pound black bear emerged from the thicket with deadly intent. A predator feared by locals was now locking eyes with an old man, completely alone. As the massive bear reared up on its hind legs, towering 8 feet above the man, Jake knew these were his final moments. But then, the impossible happened. 3 wild bobcats burst from the forest, launching a coordinated attack against an enemy 5 times their size, risking everything to protect a human they should have instinctively avoided. The bear retreated, but one bobcat lay bleeding, possibly dying. Why would wild predators sacrifice their lives for a man? This is the story of a man and 3 bobcats. But they weren't just bobcats. They were his family. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning mist hung heavy over the Tennessee mountains when Jake Morrison first heard the desperate mewling sounds coming from beneath the fallen oak tree. It was October 2019, and the retired wildlife rehabilitator had been hiking the familiar trails behind his cabin when something made him stop. 20 years of working with injured and orphaned wildlife had taught him to recognize distress calls, and these were unmistakable. Young, terrified, and growing weaker by the hour. Carefully moving aside the rotting bark and leaves, Jake discovered them. 3 bobcat kittens, no more than 2 weeks old, their eyes barely open, huddled together in what remained of their den. The massive oak had fallen during the previous night's storm, and there was no sign of their mother. Jake waited for 6 hours, hidden downwind, hoping she would return. As darkness approached and the temperature dropped, he made the decision that would change his life forever. The kittens were critically dehydrated and hypothermic. Jake, drawing on decades of rehabilitation experience, knew their chances were slim. The smallest one, a female he would later call Misty for her gray-tinged coat, barely weighed 8 ounces. The largest, a male with distinctive flame-colored markings that earned him the name Blaze, was fighting hard, but fading fast. The middle kitten, another female with golden fur that seemed to capture sunlight itself. Sunshine was the only one still crying, as if refusing to give up. Those first weeks were a blur of 2-hour feeding schedules, specialized formula, and careful temperature monitoring. Jake converted his spare bedroom into a nursery, complete with heating pads and the soft stuffed animals that would become the kittens' surrogate mothers. He documented everything meticulously, knowing that if fish and wildlife discovered he was raising bobcats without proper permits, he could face serious legal consequences. But something about these 3 made him take the risk. As the kittens grew, so did their bond with Jake. Unlike the countless animals he'd rehabilitated and released over the years, these 3 seemed to understand that he had saved them. Blaze would purr, a deep, rumbling sound unique to bobcats, whenever Jake entered the room. Misty developed a habit of sleeping curled against his neck during their afternoon naps. But it was Sunshine who formed the deepest connection, following him everywhere, her amber eyes tracking his every movement with an intelligence that sometimes unnerved him. By spring, they had grown into magnificent juveniles, their spotted coats gleaming with health. Jake had expanded their living space to include a large enclosed area connected to his cabin through a custom-built cat door. They could come and go as they pleased, hunt the abundant rabbits and squirrels on his 40-acre property, but they always returned home by nightfall. Neighbors in the valley below sometimes reported seeing them, but Jake had been careful to choose his property location years ago, 5 miles from the nearest house, backed by thousands of acres of national forest. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons. Jake taught them to hunt more efficiently, using techniques he'd learned from indigenous trackers during his younger days. He watched them develop their own personalities. Blaze became the protector, always alert, always watching the perimeter. Misty was the hunter, capable of spectacular leaps and possessed of infinite patience. Sunshine was the heart of their small pride, the one who seemed to understand human emotion, who would press against Jake's leg when his arthritis acted up, who would chirp softly when he sat alone on the porch, missing his late wife Martha, who had passed 5 years before he found the kittens. It was a Tuesday morning in November 2024, 5 years after that fateful rescue, when everything changed. Jake had risen early to split firewood for the coming winter. The forest was particularly quiet that morning. Too quiet, he would later reflect. The usual symphony of birdsong was absent, and even the ever-present rustle of squirrels in the canopy had ceased. He had just raised his axe for another swing when he heard it. A low, guttural huff that made every hair on his body stand on end. The black bear emerged from the laurel thicket 30 feet away, massive and dark against the frost-covered ground. Jake recognized him immediately. A boar that locals called Goliath, estimated at over 500 pounds, with a reputation for raiding camps and showing no fear of humans. Jake knew the rules. Make yourself big, make noise, back away slowly. But Goliath wasn't following the usual script. The bear's eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that spoke of hunger, desperation, or perhaps territoriality. The bear rose on his hind legs, standing nearly 8 feet tall, and Jake realized with crystal clarity that he was in serious trouble. The attack came faster than Jake expected. Goliath dropped to all fours and charged, covering the distance with terrifying speed. Jake swung the axe, catching the bear's shoulder, but it was like hitting a moving boulder. The impact knocked Jake backward, the axe flying from his hands. He hit the ground hard, the breath exploding from his lungs, and saw the bear rear up above him, massive paws ready to strike. The forest exploded into chaos. 3 tawny blurs launched themselves from different directions, all fury and feline rage. Blaze hit the bear's flank, 25 pounds of muscle and claw raking deep furrows through thick fur. Misty went for the hind legs, her powerful jaws clamping down and refusing to let go despite the bear's violent thrashing. But it was Sunshine who took the greatest risk, leaping directly at Goliath's face, her claws seeking his eyes, her screaming yowl piercing the morning air. Jake scrambled to his feet, grabbed a fallen branch, and joined the fight. The bear, confused and overwhelmed by the coordinated attack, spun and swiped, his massive paws connecting with terrible force. Jake saw Sunshine take a direct hit that sent her flying into a tree trunk with a sickening thud. But she was back on her feet in an instant, blood streaming from her shoulder, launching herself again at the bear with even greater ferocity. The battle seemed to last forever, but probably took less than 2 minutes. Goliath, faced with 4 determined opponents and sporting numerous wounds, including deep scratches dangerously close to his eyes, finally decided retreat was the better option. He turned and crashed back through the laurel, his roars echoing through the valley as he fled. Jake stood gasping, adrenaline making his hands shake uncontrollably. Blaze and Misty circled him, their fur still bristled, eyes scanning for any sign of the bear's return. But Jake's attention was entirely on Sunshine, who had collapsed beside the woodpile, her breathing labored and irregular. The wound was bad, deep gashes along her shoulder and side, possibly broken ribs, definitely significant blood loss. Jake's rehabilitation experience told him what he already knew in his heart. She needed immediate veterinary intervention, the kind only a wildlife hospital could provide. He also knew what that meant. Taking her to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in Knoxville would mean surrendering her to the system. She would be treated, yes, but she would never be returned to him. State and federal law was clear. Rehabilitated bobcats must be released into the wild, far from human habitation. No exceptions. Jake knelt beside Sunshine, her blood warm on his hands, and faced the cruelest choice of his life. Keep her here and try to treat her himself, knowing she would likely die, or save her life and lose her forever. Sunshine's amber eyes found his, and in them he saw trust, pain, and something that might have been understanding. "I won't let you die," he whispered, his voice breaking. The drive to the Wildlife Center was the longest hour of Jake's life. He had wrapped Sunshine in his jacket, her blood soaking through the fabric. She made soft, chirping sounds, the same ones she'd made as a kitten, and Jake talked to her constantly, his voice the only comfort he could offer. The staff at the East Tennessee Wildlife Rehabilitation Center reacted with professional efficiency, mixed with barely concealed amazement. A 5-year-old female bobcat, obviously habituated to humans with injuries consistent with a bear attack. Jake told them most of the truth, that he'd been raising her since she was orphaned, that she and her siblings had saved his life. He saw the mixture of admiration and disapproval in their eyes. Dr. Sarah Williams, the head veterinarian, was kind but firm. "Mr. Morrison, what you did raising these cats, it's illegal, you understand that? But," she paused, seeing his stricken face, "but she's alive because of you, and you're alive because of her. We'll save her, I promise you that. The surgery will be extensive, but she's strong. She's a fighter." The surgery took 4 hours. Jake waited in the lobby, ignoring the disapproving glances from staff members who whispered about the Bobcat man. Finally, Dr. Williams emerged, exhausted but smiling. She made it through. 3 broken ribs, severe lacerations, significant blood loss, but she's stable. Recovery will take months, but she'll make it. Jake's relief was immediately tempered by what came next. The center's director, a stern woman named Margaret Foster, laid out the reality. "Mr. Morrison, I should report this to Fish and Wildlife. You could face significant fines, even jail time. But Dr. Williams has advocated for you, and frankly, this is a unique situation. We'll keep this internal, but you need to understand. Sunshine stays with us. Once she's healed, she'll be relocated to a suitable habitat, far from human settlement. You can visit during her recovery, supervised visits only, but once she's released, that's it. No contact. Ever. Do you understand?" Jake understood. He understood that he was losing a piece of his heart. The months that followed were bittersweet torture. Jake visited Sunshine every day the center allowed, which was 3 times a week. She would press against the enclosure fence when she saw him, making the same chirping sounds, her amber eyes never leaving his face. He would sit for hours, telling her about Blaze and Misty, showing her photos on his phone, which she seemed to watch with interest. The staff was amazed by their bond. Even the skeptical Margaret Foster admitted she'd never seen anything like it. But rules were rules. Laws were laws. As Sunshine regained her strength, as her wounds healed into scars, the day of her release approached like a slow-moving storm. Dr. Williams chose the release site carefully, a protected area in the Cherokee National Forest, 50 miles from Jake's cabin, rich with prey and far from human habitation. Jake was not allowed to know the exact location. The last visit destroyed him. It was a cold February morning, snow threatening in the heavy clouds. Sunshine seemed to sense this was different. She pressed her whole body against the fence, and when Jake reached through to stroke her fur, she grabbed his hand gently with her paw, holding it. Not with claws, just holding, the way she used to when she was a kitten and didn't want him to leave her pen. "You saved my life, sweet girl," Jake whispered, tears flowing freely. "Now I have to let you save your own. Be free, Sunshine. Be wild. Be everything you were meant to be." Dr. Williams had to physically lead him away. The release was conducted without him, of course. Dr. Williams called him that evening to confirm it had gone smoothly. Sunshine had hesitated at the carrier door, looked back once, then disappeared into the forest with the fluid grace of her kind. Jake thanked her and hung up, then sat in his dark cabin and wept like he hadn't since Martha died. Spring came slowly to the mountains that year. Blaze and Misty searched for their sister for weeks, calling for her in their distinctive voices, checking all her favorite spots. Jake found them sometimes sitting at the edge of the forest, watching, waiting. He knew they were grieving too. Life gradually found a new rhythm, emptier but continuing. Jake threw himself into legitimate wildlife rehabilitation work, finally getting proper permits, working with the same center that had saved Sunshine. It helped, a little. Dr. Williams became a friend, occasionally sharing stories of other released bobcats thriving in the wild, never directly mentioning Sunshine but offering comfort nonetheless. It was November again, a full year since the bear attack, when Jake stood at his kitchen window watching the first heavy snow of the season. Blaze and Misty were curled together on their favorite porch bed, content and warm. The forest was silent, peaceful in that way only winter brings. Then he saw movement at the tree line. At first, Jake thought it was his imagination, wishful thinking made manifest in the swirling snow. But the shapes moved closer, cautious but deliberate. His heart began to pound as a female bobcat emerged from the shadows, her coat thick with winter fur, her movements confident and strong. Behind her, 3 smaller shapes followed, kittens, perhaps 4 months old, their spotted coats perfect miniatures of their mothers. The female stopped at the edge of the cleared yard, maybe 40 feet from the cabin. The porch light caught her face, and Jake's breath stopped. The right ear bore a distinctive scar, a mark from a bear's claw that would never fully fade. Sunshine. Jake moved slowly to the door, opened it carefully. Blaze and Misty were instantly alert, their bodies tense, then suddenly relaxing as they caught a familiar scent. They made soft chirping sounds, and from across the yard, Sunshine answered. She didn't come closer. She was wild now, truly wild, as she was meant to be. But she sat in the snow, her 3 kittens pressed against her, and looked directly at Jake. In that gaze was everything. Gratitude, love, acknowledgement of a bond that transcended the boundaries between wild and tame. Jake sank to his knees on the porch, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Sunshine," he whispered, and her ears pricked forward at her name. She stayed for perhaps 10 minutes, her kittens growing bold enough to play in the snow while she watched. Then, as if responding to some signal only she could hear, she stood, chirped once more. A sound that seemed to say both goodbye and thank you, and melted back into the forest, her kittens bounding after her. But she didn't go far. Over the following weeks, Jake would catch glimpses of them. Sunshine teaching her kittens to hunt in the meadow behind his cabin, their tracks in the snow around the old oak where he'd first found her and her siblings, their eyes reflecting green in the darkness just beyond the reach of his porch light. Dr. Williams, when Jake finally told her during one of his volunteer shifts, was astounded. "She's established her territory near you." That's unprecedented, Jake. Bobcats don't do that. She's wild, truly wild, but she's chosen to raise her family where she can. Watch over you, maybe? Like you watched over her? Jake liked that thought. As winter deepened, he would sometimes leave deer scraps at the forest edge, always gone by morning. On the coldest nights, he thought he could hear her calling, a sound answered by Blaze and Misty, a conversation in a language older than human words. The Wildlife Center never found out about Sunshine's choice of territory. Dr. Williams kept that secret, understanding that some bonds transcend regulations and rules. Jake continued his rehabilitation work, saving other creatures, giving them the second chance Sunshine had given him. But nothing ever compared to those 3 bobcats who had become his family. On quiet evenings, Jake would sit on his porch with Blaze and Misty, now approaching their senior years, but still strong, still his guardians. And sometimes, if the moon was bright and the forest was still, he would see amber eyes watching from the shadows. Sunshine keeping her own watch, protecting him as he had once protected her. The bear called Goliath was never seen in that part of the forest again. Whether from fear of the bobcats or simply choosing easier territory, no one knew. But Jake liked to think that Sunshine's presence, her fierce maternal protectiveness extended to the human who had raised her, kept the danger at bay. Years later, when Jake would tell this story to young wildlife rehabilitators, they would often ask if he regretted his choice. Raising the bobcats, letting Sunshine go, all of it. "Regret?" Jake would say, his weathered hands steady, his eyes distant with memory. "How can you regret love? She was mine for a time, then she was her own. Then she chose to be both. She saved my life twice. Once from that bear and once from the loneliness that was killing me after Martha passed. Now she's out there, wild and free, but still connected. Still family. That's not something you regret. That's something you treasure." And on certain nights, when the moon is full and the Tennessee mountains are silver with frost, if you know where to look, you might see them. An old man on a cabin porch, 2 elderly bobcats beside him, and in the forest shadows, a family of wild cats keeping watch. Not tame, not pets, but something more profound. Proof that love transcends the boundaries we create, that family isn't always about blood or even species, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the wild chooses to love us back. The story of Jake and his bobcats became something of a legend in East Tennessee, shared in whispers among wildlife rehabilitators and conservation officers. Some dismissed it as exaggeration or fantasy, but those who knew Jake, who had seen the scars on his arms from the bear attack, who had witnessed Sunshine's recovery, and who occasionally caught glimpses of a scarred-ear bobcat and her descendants near a certain cabin in the mountains, they knew the truth. Love finds a way. Even across the divide between wild and tame, it finds a way.